X-Men: Children of the Atom was released in late 1995 and was the first 2D killer app from Capcom. It was eagerly awaited by hardcore gamers, as the Saturn was the first console on the home market truly capable of bringing the arcade version home intact. Capcom would deliver a near-perfect port and begin its reign as one of the most prolific third parties making games on the Saturn. Children of the Atom would boast massive sprites, detailed animations, and great voice work from the cast of the then-hit TV series. Tight control and vicious difficulty would make sure you kept coming back for more. It remains a truly unique and playable fighter, and is affordable in every region, especially Japan. Dropped in August of 1995, Street Fighter the Movie, Real Battle on Film, has to be one of the strangest games released in the 32-bit era. I was initially under the impression the game was a port of the arcade game of similar name, but is in fact another version of Super Street Fighter II Turbo, using the theme of the movie as a template to overhaul the visual style. While the game played competently enough, its awful presentation ruins any appeal it could have today. The digitized graphics have aged poorly, and its FMV is laughably bad. While it's affordable, it's also one of Capcom's weakest entries on the Sega Saturn. I recommend you stay far, far away. Street Fighter Zero, or Street Fighter Alpha in English territories, would be Capcom's prequel to Street Fighter II. Launched in early 1996, it incorporated characters from Final Fight and introduced new characters such as Rose and Dan. New gameplay elements would show up here, including air blocking and zero chain combos, which was the ability to interrupt animations to link low, middle, and high attacks into one single vicious combo. The game would be well received, if a bit overshadowed by Children of the Atom, which was released just a couple months prior. Its low character count, subdued musical score, and plain backgrounds simply didn't appeal as heavily as the flashy X-Men game. However, it still stands on its own as a great 2D fighter, and is definitely worth owning on the Sega Saturn. Vampire Hunter, or Night Warriors in the West, would be Capcom's sequel to the incredible Darkstalkers game. It landed a mere month after Street Fighter Zero, and would take everything about the first game that was good and amp it up into this colorful and extremely playable monster-themed fighter. Comprised of a cast of lovable characters filled with personality, its beautiful animation and Street Fighter-inspired gameplay would make it an instant hit with fight fans. The game is nearly given away in its Japanese form, and there's absolutely no excuse not to own it. Released in the second half of 1996, Street Fighter Zero 2 would be the first clear evidence of Capcom mastering the Sega Saturn hardware for its 2D ports. Here, we would have a game noticeably superior to its PlayStation counterpart, and a massive upgrade to the first Street Fighter Zero game. Nearly everything is improved here: character count, animation, background detail, musical score, and gameplay. The Saturn version would also see the first use of Evil Ryu, a fallen version of Ryu using some of Akuma's moveset, and a darker color palette. Street Fighter Zero 2 would be one of my most played Saturn games of that era, and once again, is ludicrously cheap in its Japanese form. After Capcom had such an incredible 1996 lineup of 2D fighters on the Saturn, they would change up things and throw the market a curveball with the release of Cyberbots: Full Metal Madness in March of 1997. This giant mech-themed fighter would allow the player to choose a pilot and then a mech to do battle. Fights consisted of the standard best-of-3 format with Street Fighter-inspired gameplay and special moves. The game would not see a release outside of Japan, and received a lukewarm reception. The game by no means is bad, but its appeal was extremely limited due to a small run by the arcade version of the game. The Saturn port is faithful and uses the 1 MB RAM expansion cartridge. There is a LE version available as well. In August of 1997, Capcom would finally drop the much anticipated home release of Marvel Superheroes for the Sega Saturn. Taking a page from Children of the Atom, Marvel Superheroes would impress with huge sprites, killer animation, and a much wanted list of new faces, including Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Captain America, and Iron Man. Supercharged by the 1 MB memory expansion, Marvel Superheroes would fill the screen with expanded combos, flashy supers, and a new Infinity Gem system, which allowed the player to power themselves up with various bonuses such as speed, life regeneration, and armor. While the port was overall faithful, the game would suffer from mild hitching and slowdown not present in their previous Saturn translations. This game has exploded in price in the US, so look for the import version at far more appealing prices. A month after Marvel Superheroes dropped, Capcom would release Street Fighter Collection for the Sega Saturn. This compilation was comprised of 2 discs. The first contained Super Street Fighter 2 and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. The ports would be virtually arcade perfect. They would decimate the 3DO version visually, but lacked the incredible remixed soundtrack of that game. Disc 2 would contain the coveted Street Fighter 02 Dash, an upgraded version of the original Street Fighter 02. It would retain everything that made the original such a hit, and add the infuriating Goki mode. Here, you would fight Shin Goki in his hardest and most overpowering form. He could stop mid-animation to change moves based on your reactions, and is by far the hardest boss in any Street Fighter I've ever played. And here, for your sadistic enjoyment, is my first match in years against the tyrant of a character known as Shin Goki.
Round 1, fight!
Capcom would change the world forever in November of 1997 with its launch of X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Requiring the newly minted 4 MB memory expansion, it would jumpstart the Versus series of fighters, a team-based combat system where you could change fighters in and out at will. The game impressed with the best 2D animation of any Capcom fighter to date, as well as new gameplay additions such as team-based super combos. An expanded combo system and improved speed over previous Marvel-themed games would shoot X-Men vs. Street Fighter to the top of every fighting fan's list. This port remains one of the most impressive fighters to date, and absolutely shites on the PlayStation version of the game in every way. It was only released in Japan on the Saturn, and is still affordable even today. After such an impressive 1997, Capcom needed something special to start off its 1998 lineup, And they did just that in April 1998 with Vampire Savior. The sequel to Vampire Hunter, Vampire Savior would require the 4 MB memory expansion to paint one of the most visually unique games of the era. Every facet of its design oozed AAA quality, from its background detail, character animations, and newly expanded combo and super move laden gameplay. The game is visually flawless, and its character lineup boasting some of Capcom's best work in terms of design and balance. Few games on the Saturn from anyone are in its league, and is one of the best fighters on the machine. And as usual, the Japanese version remains extremely affordable. In a rare departure for Capcom, they would launch the Ultra Cute Pocket Fighter in July of 1998. Using a visual style similar to Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Pocket Fighter would bring the most dramatic change to the tried and true Street Fighter gameplay formula to date. The player would collect gems to power up various moves to crush their opponent. These moves would grow more powerful and flashy as the match progressed, leading to spectacular finishes. Pocket Fighter is an overlooked gem of a game on the Saturn, containing some of the best animation and unique gameplay in the genre. Only released in Japan, it can be purchased affordably even today. Following the impressive Vampire Savior, Capcom would release Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter in October of 1998. Taking the formula from X-Men vs. Street Fighter nearly beat for beat, it would add new faces to the Capcom Vs. series and retain everything that made its forebearer great. Capcom would add variable assist in this game, a later staple for the Vs. series, where you could summon an attack from an off-screen partner to counterattack or assist in combos. Most of the stages are simple palette swaps of X-Men vs. Street Fighter, but the addition of Mech Goki as your final boss more than made up for any lack of new content. Once again, the Saturn version would trounce the PlayStation version in every single way, and is still affordable to add to your collection today. Launched curiously in December of 1998, Capcom Generations 5 would be a compilation comprised of Street Fighter II, Street Fighter II Champion Edition, and Street Fighter II Turbo, all of which are easily accessible to one another in their main menus. This compilation seemed greatly out of place after the launch of the 4 MB assisted powerhouses, Vampire Savior, and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Nevertheless, these ports were extremely playable, and are just about the best versions of these games ever released. Unfortunately, this compilation has shot up in price in recent years, demanding around $100 these days for a complete copy. I'm not sure I'd drop the asking price it goes for now, but if you want to go old school and play these games that launched the genre to stardom, you can't do much better than these. There is an old saying that greatness is often saved until last. No game has ever embodied that more than Street Fighter 03, launched with finality in August of 1999. The Saturn was all but dead, its successor on the market already, and no one was paying attention to the once 2D powerhouse, now utterly forgotten in the wake of its newer siblings' wave of hype. However, the Saturn would not go quietly into the night. Instead, screaming at the top of its lungs, "I am still the most powerful 2D machine on the planet." In that final gasp of strength and defiance, Capcom would drop Street Fighter 03 on the Sega Saturn, the best home version of that game ever released. It would require the 4 MB RAM expansion to give us arcade-perfect animation and backgrounds. It would also feature the incredible dramatic battle modes, which allowed the player to fight a series of fights, including 2 vs 1 and 1 vs 2 at the same time. This mode was incredibly difficult, but tested you in ways no Street Fighter has, before or since. And once again, for your viewing pleasure, me trying 1 vs 2 dramatic battle after a few months of rust. Enjoy.
Select your character. Select your fighting style.
Get ready, fighters! Go for it, man!